Welcome to the Marta Hobbs podcast, a sacred space of reclamation, unraveling, and in the age where loneliness and isolation are at an all-time high, also a place of deep connection to each other as well as to ourselves. As I share the intimate journey of my own life, I hope to reflect your own so that you can live more deeply and freely from a place of full alignment and authenticity. Because that is what we're here to do, to continually discover ourselves in order to fully express our sacredness, wholeness, and radiance as women. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to the Marta Hobbs podcast. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that I have really experienced in my life, and that is losing myself in my relationships. It's not only something I have experienced, but it's also something I have healed, if healing is the right word, or something that I have matured, healed, studied, and really observed about myself and women in general. And so what exactly am I talking about? It's this whole concept of using the people you're in relationship with to define who you are, but also this idea of merging either with your partner or with your children to the point that you really lose a sense of where you end and where someone else begins. And I'll give you an example from my own life, what that looks like in practice or in living. You know, I remember being in my, like 18 or early 20s, right before I met my husband. And I was lucky. I met my husband pretty early on. I was 21. But before stepping into that relationship, I had a pretty good sense of what I loved in life, which was travel, exploring new places. You know, I was always organizing things, events for friends, get-togethers. I was a gatherer. I was an event planner. I knew what I wanted to do career-wise. So that was clear. But what I really didn't have a sense of back then was a true and real sense of self. And now that I'm 50, I am understanding that that is actually quite normal. And, you know, before I met Jim, I was very much a unit, a part of my family, my mom, my dad, and my sister. We had immigrated from Poland when I was 12 at a key developmental stage in a child's development or life. And normally it's at that age, 12, 13, that you start to go through a process called individuation. I love this word. I love this concept. And it's something that I skipped as a teenager. And that is, you know, when you're little, when you're a baby, your sense of identity comes from how your caretakers, the adults present in your life, what they mirror back to you, right? And so whether you feel safe, whether you feel loved, a sense of who you are comes from those raising you. And so you become a part of a family. As you get a little bit older, you start to venture out from that safe unit of family into that of a unit of your peers. So who am I in relation to my friends? And that is when we immigrated from Poland to the United States. So I never, rather than exploring the identity who I am amongst my peers, I clung more tightly to my family, and it became meshed and, you know, almost like immersed in my family, giving me my identity. And then because, as I said, I was lucky and I met my husband quite early on, I went pretty much from living at home to being married to my husband. And so, like I said, I had a sense of things that I loved to do in my life when I was in college, and I loved a sense of adventure, something exciting. I was always starting businesses, pretty strong initiative, organizing plans, you know, always looking for the next fun thing, exploring. And then same within our marriage early on. But when we started to have children, I had my daughter when I was 23. It's sort of now that I look back that I can see where the lostness in the relationship got even deeper. Already there wasn't a sense of individuation of who I was as an individual inside of my family, outside of my family. So rather than going through that process of who am I on my own 2 feet, I went from being a family member to being a member of a unit called marriage, and then my secondary family, which then got larger as I had my daughter and then my son. And so it kind of like went straight from one to the other. And that for me was my identity. Wife, mother, daughter. Then as we started to grow our company, which became quite large quite quickly, that also became a part of my identity and who I was, the founder, the COO. And again, losing myself in the larger unit. So I never realized that there wasn't a cohesive sense of self until fast forward 15 years after starting our company, when my kids were already a little bit older. My son was in 3rd grade, my daughter was in 8th grade. The identity that I had based my life upon started to show tiny little cracks, or the experience of something being missing. And the thing that was missing was really my connection to myself, my knowing myself. And I went on this beautiful self-development, self-discovery journey. That's just a little background, a little context and color for how very often this is just how we live in life, defined by the titles and the roles that we play for other people. And I say that's losing ourselves in the relationships because we become defined by, I am Jim's wife, I am Mira's mom, I am AJ's mom, I am this company's founder or COO, now I'm all of it outside of ourselves. And where that tends to start to crack is when we realize that we're constantly externally focused to give us a sense of who we are. Really leaving this emptiness and void within. And for me, that whole structure of self was like building a castle on a sand. Like it had to collapse. It had to crumble because the structure itself was unstable and it was empty on the inside. And so when my health issues, anxiety, depression, all of a sudden surfaced when we sold the company and I lost a huge part of my identity, that was where the crack in that external facade that I had presented to the world as who I was invited me to live the question of, who am I? Because if I exist in the world so enmeshed with others to define who I am, that means others are constantly also defining how I feel. I am giving away control and power over my own state of being, state of feeling. I have no agency. I constantly am placing it in the hands of others. If my husband wakes up in a good mood, I'm in a good mood. If my kids feel great, I feel great. If the employees at work are, being productive and not having argument, I'm feeling fantastic. It's great unless any one of those 3 areas, family, work, kids, spouse, have humanly bad day themselves, I am also impacted. And so when I started to see that, and I started to explore the idea of, well, where do I end and someone else begins? Can my husband have his own feelings and opinions about something? And can that be without me taking it on? Without me having to have a reaction to it, having a like or a dislike about it? Can that just be as a part of him? His own thoughts, his own feelings, his own beliefs, his own energy. Where does that end? And where does the space of me begin? Because if we're thinking along the same lines and we're both liking the same things, or we both wanting to do the same thing for the day and everything's smooth, we say, oh, we get along great. We never argued, which we said for a long time. But when I have the audacity to express disagreement with what he wants or what he's thinking, which invites tension in, then all of a sudden, I have a hard time existing because I'm constantly looking to him to make me feel good, to regulate me, because I cannot do that for myself. And once I started to see how disempowering that was, and also how much it placed on him in terms of expectations, expecting him to be everything for me, my comforter, my confidant, my partner, the one I cry to. I just placed so much weight on what I needed him to be and to do in order for me to feel okay. I also felt that same from him. He needed and wanted so much of me. I felt suffocated. And I was like, there has to be another way. And as I started to really look at our identities in marriage and how codependent we had become, I was really surprised. And then I also studied the whole idea of independence. And, it's normal to go from a space of complete codependency. He needed me. He was also in full alcohol addiction at the time that I started to do this work. He did need me for a lot of things. And a lot of the identity that I got from being the one everyone in my family leaned on had to be something I had to release, which was hard because in a way it made me feel good. I needed it to be okay. I had become so used to being the one that fixes all the messes, gathers, the broken pieces and just like organizes it. Like I called myself the glue in the family, and there was pride in that. That was who I was. Everyone leaned on me, and that felt good. However, there was so much pressure that came with it. And the inside of me empty, it had to crack. And so it did. And when I started to rebuild myself and who I was, I really started the inner work of individuation. Who am I outside of the roles I play for other people? Who am I outside of my family, outside of my marriage, outside of being a mom, a daughter? Who am I outside of my business, my job? Who am I outside of what I do? When I'm too sick to function in life, which I was for a season, I had heart issues, I had debilitating panic attacks, horrible depression. I was struggling. It cannot be that I am worth less and that I have no identity at the times that I'm unable to do all the things I used to do before. And so I started to carve out space between me and other people in my life. And in the beginning, it was really difficult because the people around me were so used to me being a certain way. It also provided them their identity, the way they related to me, the way we related to each other. So when I started to shift that dance, that pattern of being in relationship with them, it was highly unstable and uncomfortable for them. It's like pulling a rug from under their feet, changing the dance suddenly. But I just got to a certain stage in my life where I was like, I had been giving and giving and giving and had nothing left to give. And I started to see that so often saying yes to others was saying no to myself. And that the emptiness that I had been starting to come in contact with was self-abandonment. The way I related to myself was like I didn't matter. It was all about everyone else around me. And that's what I thought love was. That self-sacrificial, constant giving and pouring into others. However, I was so blind to seeing that the one person I was never loving in that dynamic was myself. Someone gave me this beautiful visual one time of eggs. So in a relationship, you don't want to be like scrambled eggs, where there is no boundaries in terms of where you end and where your partner begins, or your kids, or even your business. There's enmeshment. There's scrambles. And when you feel your feelings or other people's feelings and you're responsible for their state of being, their wellness, their happiness, it's all scrambled. Not healthy. Now, usually what we do, that's codependency, right? Usually what we do from there, we go all the way over to the other extreme. That's how I learn anyway. Push hard against a thing that's not working. Try the opposite. Independence. 2 hard-boiled eggs. Hard shells, each their own. And you see a lot of this happening right now. Women are rebelling against that enmeshment, wanting to find their inner selves, their true selves, reconnect to their passions, their desires, and their hearts. And it's beautiful. But that's not the end point. Because when you find that individual part of who you are, so the 2 hard-boiled eggs aren't healthy either, right? When you find that true essence, your soul, your individuated self, the goal isn't to stay there. I got myself. I got my own back. I don't need anyone. That is also an immature view of what it is to be human. It's not enmeshment and codependence, but it's not independence either. We're wired for connection. So having experienced both the scrambled egg stage and then moving myself through the hard-boiled egg stage, then, as always, the pendulum swings towards the middle where we find a happy balance and harmony of the visual of 2 sunny side up eggs, where the white of the eggs meet and merge in union, but there's still a very clear, beautiful, round, yellow part. There are 2 of them. Interdependence. So 2 humans choosing a relationship, be it your kids, be it your spouse, your partner, be it someone at work, there is a clear definition of the self in each one, the 2 yellow parts. And then the relationship is the third shape, the third thing that's formed as we come together and choose to relate to one another. Interdependence. And so that is the space that I choose to live life from now. In my marriage, in my friendships, in my work, but also within me. While I self-abandoned for a long time, I choose to now to fill up my own cup. And as I do, there is a softness that comes back into the way I am these days. So much of the first half of life was about survival and getting and striving and succeeding and the external things. And again, none of it was wrong or incorrect. That's just my path, and maybe yours too. So for the first half of our life, we usually are very ego-focused, very externally focused. Our careers matter. The stuff, the homes that we build, we gather things. And then Carl Jung called this the day of life. And then as we shift into the afternoon season, or the second half of life, there is a shift of our gaze, and we start to look within. We start to tend to our own soil, our own roots, our own inner experience. We leave the weight we've been carrying on our shoulders of others and their feelings and their states. We begin to let that be, and we start to tend to ourselves. We're looking for deeper meaning in life. We're looking for service. Looking for, what is our significance here? Who am I? Why am I here? And for me, it was so easy to define myself by, I'm a refugee, I'm an immigrant, I'm a I'm a production employee, I'm a business owner, I'm a wife, I'm a mother. There was so much that was happening in my life. And when everything started to slow down right around my 40th birthday, we sold our business. The kids got a little bit older, more independent. We moved to Paris. I was outside of my comfort zone. We came from the US to France. My husband went to rehab. I was all of a sudden further from my parents, who also relied on me for help. There was all of a sudden space in my life. I was like, who am I when I'm by myself, with myself? Who am I to myself? And so an inner relationship began to form. While I had been constantly pushing and striving and achieving up until that point, a softening happened. I began to reconnect not just with the soul and her whispers, not just with the deeper identity of who am I at that spiritual level, but with my own feminine energy. I had this feeling I wanted to wear long skirts. I wanted to take dance lessons. I started to buy flowers for the house. Everything started to just be about beauty and tenderness and softness, but towards myself. I'd really realized how hard I had been pushing myself to love others and how little I knew about or was modeled to me in terms of loving myself well. And so an inner masculine and feminine started to develop. This beautiful dance between my fighter, my survivor, my warrior, and the feminine that dances, that becomes, that flows, that is constantly blooming and looking to expand and to be more. And I really started to reconnect to myself within the relationship within myself, as I started to find who I am within the relationships I had with other people. And so I could tolerate the discomfort of my husband having a different opinion than me, my kids doing something I don't like without it ruining my day, my parents wanting something I didn't want, not needing to please them. All of a sudden, there was a rootedness and a groundedness in who I was as a woman. And I showed up as her uniquely and authentically. But the same way in every relationship, do you ever notice that you show up one way with your coworkers, another way with your girlfriends, another way with your spouse, totally different way with your kids? Why do we fragment? For the sake of love from others. But if the thing that fuels you is your own love for yourself, if that becomes your energy, your life force, your identity, if you're rooted in that and full of yourself, you show up the same way in every relationship. And there's no more losing yourself in others. You have a really good sense of who you are. And that's what you bring into relationship then. I mean, it's so different. Having been married for almost 30 years now, showing up in a relationship with my husband as the grown woman that I am versus the needy little girl. And when he shows up as the grown man that he is versus the needy, wounded little boy, the dynamic is so different. And what we're co-creating in our life is so different. And what we're able to give to one another and to others, to our children, to our friends, is really sacred and precious. So few people get to this level in their relationship. And it was hard work for seasons, but it was so worth it. He is such a mirror to what is going on within me, and I do the same for him. So now, rather than look to him to make me feel a certain way, I look at what he triggers in me that still shows me the places in my life where I'm unfree. Gosh, if he does something and it really bothers me, it's nothing to do with him. I get to look at why. Why is that bothering me so much? Everything to me is about self-study, self-discovery for expansion and growth. Our marriage is a spiritual container. And just like he mirrors things to me, I mirror things back at him. And with the willingness of both of us to look at each other and our own stuff, but also to hold the other one as we try to heal an old wound or childhood pain that comes up in a simple conversation that just doesn't go right, relationship becomes the place where I actually find myself. Not through my husband, through my own internal inner work, using his holding, his presence as a mirror as to what else is coming up that is asking to be held, loved, integrated, and then released. And now there is a clear knowing of where I end and where he begins. I let him sit with his pain while watching my own discomfort of what it is to watch someone you love struggle, but I don't need to fix it. I don't need to fix him. I tend to the discomfort within me, and then I tend to him sitting in his pain. But they're separate. There isn't just this feeling of like, oh, this is so fucked up. This is so hard. There are clearer lines, but at the same time, we're constantly choosing to lean on one another, to hold the other, while remembering that in our humanness, we're going to screw up and make mistakes. And that love is just seeing the best in one another. That doesn't mean I have no boundaries or I let him walk all over me. My no is a no and it's a complete sentence. No, thank you. My standards now are high and they're clear and they're obvious. I speak my truth in love. I ask for help. I voice what I need. And knowing that I can provide everything for myself, I can be super independent. I choose to lean on him. I choose to share with him that what hurts, the vulnerable sides of me, not so that he can fix it, not even so that he can hold me because I know I can hold myself, but because I want to show him those parts of myself that I generally hide from the world. Can you see me at that depth, in my worst, in my hardest, in my brokenheartedness and pain? I allow him into those spaces that are usually locked behind closed doors. Not for him to fix, heal, or make it better, but for him to see. Can he love me in those moments? Is he capable of that kind of love? Am I capable of receiving it, believing that I'm worthy of it? It's been such an interesting journey. And I know we're still learning, expanding, and growing, and that is beautiful. So I just wanted to share that with you today and give you a couple of things to reflect on. So if this resonated with you, let me know. And I will see you here next time. Sending you all my love. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you resonate with this message, or if you have a topic you'd like me to discuss in a future episode, I would love to hear about it. Send me a message on Instagram at Marta Hobbs. If you'd like to move more deeply in a community of like-minded, soul-led women, please join me in mine. It's called Come Closer. And if someone in your life would benefit from today's episode, I would love it if you send it along to them. Just click share in your podcast app and text it to a friend. Finally, I would be so grateful if you'd rate and review the Marta Hobbs podcast in your favorite podcast app. Your support will help this show find the women who need it. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm sending you all my love. Take care.